Welcome to the Eastmans Journals Podcast edition. I'm your host, Ike Eastman. Today's guest is Matt Hoobler. Now, Matt is a unique guy. He's one of these behind-the-scenes guys in the state of Wyoming that has been doing a lot of stuff, not only for conservation of wildlife, everything from sage grouse to deer to antelope to wild sheep. His big passion now is wild sheep, and a reintroductory offer, or what they're trying to do in Wyoming with moving some sheep across a highway and reintroducing them in another place, which has been kind of a hot subject with the game and fish and the landowners, agriculture producers, and how that affects. He's right in the middle of it. He explains one of those things to us and how each can work together and how he's had things work together, everything from the Shoshone National Forest use plan, all the way to sage grouse. And we also touched the hot subject of feral horses. You're right. I said it, feral horses, not wild horses. So check those things out. See the difference between wild and feral, and how they're moving sheep around in the state of Wyoming and the water use in the state of Wyoming, as well as his topic on TED Talk, which I thought, when I asked him, I thought 100% it was going to be sheep related. It's not. It's about time. It's amazing. So check that out. Hopefully you get a little bit of taste or something that can help you in the future in your life. Thanks again for joining me here on Eastman's Journal Podcast. This episode is sponsored by Fold AR. Have you ever wanted to carry a little more firepower than just a pistol? In the current trying times, it'd be nice to have an AR that fits in a backpack the size of a briefcase. Fold AR has solved that problem for you. They come in a few different versions: fold and half rifles, fold and thirds, and even an AR pistol. Don't worry about finding the perfect backpack to fit them in. They come in a backpack specifically for them, and they look just like a regular small pack. Fold ARs don't just fold up and conceal easily, but they are very safe and will hold their own at the range. Fold AR is the perfect combination of concealment and firepower. This episode is sponsored by Secure-It, the gun storage system. Have you ever wondered the best way to store your guns, ammo, and actually all your valuables? There is a fine line between safety and accessibility. There's also something to be said about being able to customize your safe for your needs. If you're storing long guns, handguns, ammo, or just need a wall to hang your equipment on, Secure-It has your back. They have cabinets, rooms, and everything in between. Secure-It. I appreciate Matt. I appreciate you coming on and sharing with us not only your story, but some of the stuff that politically in our world affects hunters, as well as some of the stuff that you guys are doing, some of the things that you're passionate about, and maybe a little bit of a history lesson in a couple species that you've been very connected to here in Wyoming. So I appreciate it.
No, and thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this. Well, honestly, since we sat together at the figure eight race and
figure eight, yeah. My nephew and your nephew were racing figure eight cars.
Exactly, and good times.
Yeah. How is he doing? Actually, he's still in mechanic school?
He is, and it is so rewarding to see someone succeed, especially someone that you care about. He's doing great. Got his it's a unique curriculum, and that you're so many weeks in the shop, so many weeks back in the classroom, and so you're getting the service truck, you're getting the ag equipment, the construction equipment, and then learning about all the electronics, the hydraulics. So he's doing really well. He now owns some older jet skis, if that gives you any indication to how well he's doing, and tears up the lakes there in Minnesota. So he's I'd love to get up there. Was actually going this September until I got invited on another 10-day sheep hunt. So we'll see if next time I get up there.
Well, those two, your nephew and mine, hung out together, and they always made me laugh because they were always into this. They buy this and redo it and then sell it for a profit. They buy an old jet ski, get it running and then sell it for a profit, or a lawnmower, or I don't know what else. They're derby cars, figure eight cars, just all kinds of stuff. And so, and I really appreciate him. And I know a lot of it had to do with you and of course his family, but he was a good kid, is a good kid. He's just growing up. Now they're pushing 21 and going to be good young men.
Exactly. And you look at how they spend their time and, what's their natural talents, and you take two steps back. Well, that looks like motivation and entrepreneurialism if you break it down. And so it's exciting to watch them both succeed.
Yeah, that's right. So that's awesome. So Matt, where did you grow up? Did you grow up in Wyoming?
So I did not. I'm grew up on a hog farm in north central Kansas.
Okay.
My father was a county agent. My mother was a home economist until she stayed home with us. I got an older sister, a younger brother. And so, yeah, my childhood was, dryland wheat and beans and farrowing and finish operation for hogs. And the funny part, I didn't realize hog farms smelled so bad until you move away and come back and you realize, man, was I the stinky kid in elementary school? But
well, at least you grew up at a place where it was pretty common. The whole place, probably the whole town and everything probably smelled very similar.
And this is agriculture back in the 70s and 80s where, hog farms weren't confined, and, you could have, different aspects of agriculture on your farm, and, the markets were a little different. So you could, diversify at what worked. And, no, I was blessed with, growing up where I did, and grew up with one of my best friends still today who I go hunt with back there in Kansas. It's just going back and reliving those childhood memories of how, far rural you were. And I used to remember, man, I had kids that played baseball. They got to go to town and play baseball, and jokes on them. I got to work in the hog pens after school. So
That'd be the stinky kid.
But no, it was good. A lot of Kansas roots, a lot of family Kansas roots. Moved to Colorado, north central Colorado, about junior high. Actually graduated there in Granby, Colorado, and then went up to the University of Wyoming for my undergrad.
So you're a K-State guy then?
Yep. So I did 4 years at the University of Wyoming, and then knew I wanted to go to grad school. And at the time, I still had a year of college rodeo eligibility left, and I really liked Montana State, and they made a little offer. I looked at staying at UW, but my folks are both K-State grads, and had an opportunity there to come back, and just the options afforded me there. And went back, did a master's degree at Kansas State. And the good news, I get to cheer for two football teams now. UW took a beating this weekend, so that
they did. I
don't have to be all sad. I can only be half sad because K-State sure looks good this year. So
yeah. We had a camera guy for a number of years that was a lineman for K-State the 4 years he was down there, and he was in the ag school too. But he that's a whole different world. Those guys, they're like robots. It's crazy. So what's the degrees in?
Undergrad was in ag communications, a unique degree that still exists at the University of Wyoming. I had got a minor in farm and ranch management, but had a desire for print journalism. Tried to fashion myself as a writer, and like so many things in my life, I had mentors that helped me. A gentleman named Clint Peck was an editor of the Farmer Stockman publications, and I remember thinking, man, I'm going to write an article and it's going to be published, and you send it out, 30 different places, and half of them you don't hear from, the other half think it's just the biggest pile of gobbledygook they've ever read, and except one guy, and that was Clint Peck, and he worked with me and helped me, and I got to do internships through him and tour around Montana and Wyoming and even Nevada. And so print journalism, I do enjoy writing. Anymore, it's more, I do it for work, and when I can crank something out for fun, I'll try and do that too. I got about 50 stories I've started, not finished. If that's any indication. So, and then
you're one of those writers.
I am one of those. And then graduate school, actually went into ag economics, went the route with the farm and ranch management. Did it on master's thesis on the beef checkoff dollar. The beef it's what's for dinner campaign, and looking at it combined some communication with some economics, but that degree sure has come in handy when you get into even the basics of introductory to financing, or just the formulas behind how to make some good decisions with your numbers. So
yep, that's interesting. So when were you in Laramie? We weren't in Laramie at the same time, were we?
Well, because you were part of the esteemed Thermopolis class, because I know Ryan Lance.
Yeah, he was a year older than me.
You're older. Okay. Yep. See, I'm a year older than Ryan.
Okay.
And I was in Laramie fall of 93 to graduate in 97.
Okay. So we weren't I went to school for 7 years. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of people do that. They're called doctors. I am not one. But I had a problem. I kept taking falls off to hunt. So
yeah,
I had that issue. Actually, I shouldn't say that. My dad had me take falls off to film. I hunted very little, but I was wandering around with a camera behind him a lot. So ag communications, which is interesting. And then of course, then you what you've done in your career. You mentioned Ryan Lance. Let's talk a little bit about, you graduated, and did you eventually right away moved back to Wyoming and started working for Gov Dave?
No, it was after I graduated with my master's, I did. I knew I wanted to be in Wyoming, and it's funny to let your mind wander, because I had a job offer in San Antonio, Texas. I had another one in Minneapolis, and you think, well, maybe who would I be today if I'd have moved to San Antonio, Texas, and taken a job that was actually a magazine down there that worked with cattle in the Gulf Coast, and it's funny. I actually came back to Cheyenne to work at a TV station, and that didn't work out. And so I farmed that summer until I started at the State of Wyoming in the Wyoming Department of Agriculture. You mentioned, Ryan Lance and Governor Dave. Gov Dave was elected in 2001.
Yeah.
His style, he had a natural resources department within government. So all state agencies could help with the federal land use planning. And that's really where, I don't want to say a calling, but I felt the federal process and land management and its impact to all industries of Wyoming, whether it's agriculture, timber, the, just multiple land use, the species use, and getting involved in like coming to Cody for the Shoshone Forest Plan revision on behalf of the Wyoming Department of Ag, and then working with the governor's office. That was a unique experience, and one that you want to make some changes to policy. It was truly a way of getting involved, but getting involved through what was then called cooperating agency status, and local conservation districts, local county commissioners. It just great discussions, and then the ability to relay that information forward on our public lands, because a lot of these counties like Park County or Sublette County, just significant percent of the county base is federal. So so that was one of my a lot of the projects I had then while working for the Wyoming Department of Agriculture up until I can't remember when I left that 2008. You're digging deep here on making me think.
making the cobwebs come out of
Right.
out of the library. So let's describe that, because obviously public land is a hot button, and it always has been, but it's a hot button topic in hunters and even more so recently. But let's talk about how that worked, because it was significant. It was one of the first times that across the agencies got together and came up with a suggestion. I wouldn't say it was, I wouldn't say they had the authority to make the rules, but a suggestion to the Forest Service on how that multi-use plan was put together. What was that, and how did it play out, and what was your role in it?
Well, if I take a step back, I mean, you still see these conversations either occurring or needing to occur today. The recent news has been, the Rock Springs field office. Other examples involve, species specific or industry specific, like timber harvest on the Black Hills National Forest, and what's that effect? What we would do is you look at, the environmental effect. Is there, why should we cut timber on federal national forests? I mean, we could put a dry erase board up and put 5 different answers. Local economics, forest health, just overall environmental stewardship, silviculture. Well, how does that relate if we have a mill in town that employs, 150 people and they rely on that? Why couldn't we combine economic development with forest stewardship? And the same examples exist for wildlife. My sheep hunt there out of Cody was on a national forest 100% of the time. I know what I paid my outfitter, and I know that he doesn't just pocket that cash or bury it in the backyard. He goes and spends it in town, either on fuel or food, and so that impact exists. And that's where you combine your natural resource and your economics to make good decisions. There are governing rules, federal rules, that say how we should plan for this, who can be involved. I hate to say it, but politics play a big part in this. Who is the forest supervisor? Who are your elected officials locally? And what are the issues that matter? I would contend that 3 out of 4 issues we agree on. And so the others, who are we to come to the table? Are we coming guns a-blaring? Or are we coming with, to have conversations, open minds? And it's not always that way. And I'm definitely not always that way. You can, I'm human too. And so, this issue is extremely similar to the one we're doing now for wild sheep reintroduction in central Wyoming. So, man, I don't know that I answered your question other than I talked through it.
So what they did, you just kind of described what the goal was. What they did with the Shoshone Forest, which for those that don't know, is the oldest national forest in the system, and it's also the largest, I believe, isn't it?
I'd have to check. It's definitely the first.
Yeah, it's definitely the first, and I think it's one of the largest if you connect all the bighorn and the ones that district is over. It's kind of the crown jewel of the Forest Service system because of the how diverse it is.
Mm-hmm.
So they decided in, was it 2001? 2002, they decided, okay, we need to get all the stakeholders involved. And then what?
Yeah, the forest through the federal planning rule at the time, and Governor Dave Friedenthal at our state capitol, we established a form of cooperating agency status. If I recall, and I think this is correct, it involved through the county commissioners. And so we as state agencies would work collectively, because we dealt with issues from game and fish to agriculture, other state lands throughout, and work with county commissioners and would participate in those discussions of federal land use planning. And yeah, the Shoshone National Forest, of the ones I've been involved in, I would pay them a compliment, not because they were the first or one of the biggest, but look at the issues. They have grizzly bears, they have wolves, they have wilderness area, and they have tourism, and you're boarding national parks. And so, to look at the uniqueness of the area, there's not a lot of answers when you're dealing with that level of uniqueness. So I was an advocate of the process. I also got to be involved in the Black Hills National Forest planning, and as well as some BLM offices, and just looking at the federal system. And it's easy to criticize if we talk about productivity or confines, but what federal workers have to jump through to get things completed, a process, is significant. We can't underestimate that. And it's a product of our own doing to say, oh yeah, we have to think about X, Y, and Z and A, B, C, D, and E and Roman numeral 5, 7, 9, and 12 to get anything done. But step back, we're checking all the boxes, and it should be fairly, it's not a win-win for everyone. No one walks away and thinks, I got everything I wanted. But
Yeah.
But like I said, if we can agree on the 75% and discuss the other part, and come to some conclusions, I hate to use the word compromise because I feel can develop some negative connotation, but it's been successful, and a lot of the forest plans have. It's an ever-changing landscape. I'd say it's not even the same forest it was 20 some years ago when we got involved in it. So
yeah, it is complex, and then you just touched on a couple of the things that that are affecting the forest or federal lands. And I was given an example here a few months ago from a law enforcement officer for the Forest Service, and he talked about how many square miles he actually covers as the only law enforcement in that many square miles, like 1 million acres or some crazy. I mean, it was just insane versus a sheriff department or a police department or even a highway patrolman. It's, that it gives it brevity of how vast and how big this area is that these guys are trying to manage, and how complex it is. It's amazing they can get anything done. Actually, just it's a huge thing. It's a huge undertaking, and it's underfunded, and it's there's not enough people. And anyway, so let's talk a little bit about some of the other stuff that you did at the state level. You mentioned, you mentioned the water use bill. You jokingly mentioned it, but I'm going to make you talk a little bit about it, because I think it's really important. I think people don't understand, if you're driving to work every day, twisting wire nuts, there's a lot of things in the world that you enjoy that you don't understand why it's there. Why are the reservoirs there? Why do they shut down some of the reservoirs because of water? Why are the rivers, or right down to wildlife management and how that's affected by water? We were talking, Todd Helms and I were just talking a few minutes ago that there's elk in the desert here in Wyoming, that there haven't been elk in there in a long time, like maybe ever in recent history anyway. And where are they getting water? And that's all part of what you guys were talking about. Every drop that hits the dirt, where's it going?
No, you've put a quarter in the jukebox here. I'm going to try and only play a couple songs. Yeah, I got involved. I had the opportunity, switched state jobs, went to work for the state engineer's office, and primarily in the interstate water management. Like you said, we have reservoirs in Wyoming, we have rivers in Wyoming. That tie to the water doesn't end at the state line. And, the most popular right now would be your Colorado River Compact, the myriad of states and countries and users. And, what is Wyoming's role in water in the Colorado River system? Why do we have to conserve water or release water at different times? So that was all new to me. Was lucky, had a great group of team members, coworkers that I went to work with and learned from. And I primarily handled the waters of the Platte River system. State of Nebraska sued the state of Wyoming 8 times. We were operating under a 1985 decision. I got here and, read the case, read what was the Brown book that described the settlement, learned the process for what Wyoming needed to report, and then looked at, well, this shows, if we do a couple things, we can remove the active suit against the state of Wyoming. And so I set off on those. And one of those was raising the spillway at Pathfinder Reservoir. Well, why would we raise the spillway? So you can store more water lost to sediment. Well, who has the water in Pathfinder? Well, the largest percentage is the state of Nebraska. And so you talk about reservoir levels. Well, you look at reservoir systems, and why would they move water from one reservoir to the other? And why is it leaving the state? Well, because we're growing corn and beans in the panhandle of Nebraska, and they have the water right because they paid for the dam. And if you don't understand the intimate knowledge of what developed Wyoming's water system, I'd even say probably the more exciting example would be there in Cody with your, Buffalo Bill was a irrigation developer, and we think of him as a Wild West showman, but he's the reason your valley there is growing crops, and I'd say, in fact, Powell exists as a little town. So, my role was represent Wyoming's interests. I got to do that, on the Belle Fourche River, the Laramie River, Niobrara, the Platte, and just learn the details. One of my chuckle moments was when the state of Kansas called us and said, "Hey, we're about to sue Nebraska. We know they sue you, and so let's talk through that." And so it doesn't change, and it's not going to change. And try living a life without water, and try living a life without rules.
Yeah.
And the tragedy of the commons has already existed for water, and we're just trying to negate some of those effects and be wise users of it. I admit where my passion went was then looking at the water regulation component to understanding just general ecology with, what were our rivers and wetlands, what are the values, and do they still hold that value if we put that type of ecosystem back on the land now? Why I'm reading a book now on beavers, and I've actually stopped reading it, so I will have something to read on my sheep hunt coming up. But it's fascinating, the world that the early European explorers encountered, and not just in the West, but what did Minnesota look like, and what did Tennessee look like, and just the influence that beavers had, and our ability to store more water. And we had when we didn't channel our stream systems and lower the water table and have an effect on aquifers. And so it was an exciting world for me to learn about water and to get to do it from a regulation standpoint, and then actually take some of those skills now and look at it from a water development standpoint. So you mentioned the water plan that came out under Governor Meade. To me, this should still be in the forefront of where the state should continue to develop. Let's utilize our water resources to the best of our ability. And, there's water that leaves the state of Wyoming that is Wyoming's water that we're not, that we're losing track of, and through these interstate compacts and decrees. So to me, it needs more attention than it gets now. The folks that are there are doing a great job, but that's a resource. That's a part of the state government that I'd get them more help if I could.
Yeah, Wyoming's a unique, it's as far as water goes, it's one of the most unique states for various reasons. You kind of touched on a few of them, but I call Wyoming the plateau or the top of the continent, because we're the only state that has water that goes into every major water system. Water that goes into the Colorado, which ends up in the Gulf of Mexico, water that goes into Mississippi ends up in Gulf of Mexico, water that goes into the Snake River, comes out Columbia, out Washington, Oregon. We're the only state that has that. Everyone else has one or two, but not all three. And so it's kind of the plateau. The other interesting thing is we could never use all of the water we have, because we have a plethora, especially on this side of the Continental Divide. We have a plethora of water. You worked in the Platte River, which is unique, and the Colorado is unique. But where I live, our water goes north into Montana, and we can't use it all. It's just unbelievable how much water comes out of this system, and partially because our system is shorter than most, but also the dam systems were one of the older ones, and so they understood how to move water from one to the other. So I agree 100% that it is a huge topic and becoming more and more of a strain as for whatever reason, Americans decide to develop places that have zero water, Phoenix, Vegas. You can go down the list of those, or places that have boom and bust. Texas, Kansas is a good one. Nebraska is a great one, where it's either boom or bust. We have more water than we know what to do with, or we don't have any. And it's a struggle. So I agree 100% that is a big thing. And so when you're out there, folks, when you're out there on a lake and you're running around pulling your kids on a tube or on skis, just remember that water is going somewhere, and it's probably earmarked for some other place than where you're sitting. So, you keep bringing up the sheep hunt. I've this is the third time, so now let's just talk about it. So I know you went on your own sheep, and how did this is going to be a fun question.
Mm-hmm.
You said you went with an outfitter. As a Wyoming resident, you went on a sheep hunt with an outfitter. Why? And I'm not saying it's wrong. I actually agree.
No, trust me, it was a debate in my own head, a debate in my own household. 2 years ago, drew my Wyoming Bighorn sheep tag. I had met Jimmy Owens as part of the Wyoming Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation board. And my decision factor was, I'm going to bring my youngest daughter. She is the hunter. She is, quite the equestrian. I just knew, how am I going to show this child this backcountry? I needed help, I guess be the way to say it. Yes, I've been on other sheep hunts, both outfitted as a, +1. And I've been on hunts on my own doing a DIY. I told myself, I said, you know what? This is going to be my only Wyoming Bighorn. Let's go with a professional. Let's make it so that I can focus on the hunt. I can focus on, having my daughter with me, which in hindsight, man, I took a lot of anxiety into the field that I didn't anticipate. When you take your 16-year-old daughter out of high school for a week and take her into some of the most remote country of Wyoming, I was glad that I had the gentleman along with me, that I did. And so, and they know where the sheep are. And I wasn't, I didn't need the biggest in Wyoming. I wouldn't have turned it down. I had the chance to go with one of my best friends, Bryce, and my daughter, Shelby, and went outfitted. I splurged, to be honest.
Which outfit did you go with?
Went with Jimmy Owens out
Okay.
there out of Cody.
Yep.
And, had 2 other guys along with the trip. And, just one thing I learned when your outfitter, because he said, when I booked with him, he goes, well, I know you can ride and you're 15 years younger than my regular clients. And he goes, we're going to go see country that I haven't seen in a while or I've never seen. And so
that should have been a red flag.
Yeah.
Matt.
Oh my God.
Should have been a red flag.
Word to the podcast listeners. If your outfitter tells that, I will tell you right now, you're not tough enough. I found after we spent the night on the mountain on night number 5, and I roll back into camp on day 6, I said, yep, sheep hunting. It's the most miserable thing you'll ever enjoy. And that was, it was amazing. And again, the fact that Shelby got to go with me, and see that country and big country. And she had to ride out, unfortunately, the day before I got my ram, but it was totally worth it. So
yeah, it's 100%. I've had guys ask me, would you ever do an outfitted hunt in Wyoming? I said, there is one outfit that I would do an outfitted hunt without question, and that would be a sheep hunt.
Yeah.
Various reasons. Number 1, it's big country. Number 2, it's an experience that you're not gonna get again unless you're a +1. And why, you need the opportunity to sit back and enjoy the hunt, focus on the hunt itself, focus on, making a clean shot, focus on the adventure of it, and not have to focus on your stock, and not have to focus on grizzly bears, and not have to focus on if the tent's going to be good enough, and if the gear is going to be good enough, and all of those things that the outfitter has to worry about every single day. You don't have to worry about those. Go enjoy the adventure and lock it away in your mind, and remember that's why you went with an outfitter. So I have there's a guy here in the office that drew on the random, young guy, 20, I think he's 25, 26.
Hate him already. Yep. Yeah.
And I said, you know what? We're going to go with one of my friends who's an outfitter. We're going to pay him as an outfitter, and we're going to take some of the complexity out of it, and you're going to enjoy this, and it's going to be awesome footage. And we're going to do a public service announcement on how these sheep and what these sheep do. And this is a unique group of sheep, because a lot of the sheep across the country came from this band of sheep, which leads me into the next question. You were talking about the sheep introduction into the central Wyoming. Let's talk about that. I don't think a lot of guys understand what's really going on and how successful it's been. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Eberly Stock. Eberly Stock is one of my favorite backpacks. Now, I've been wearing their backpack for almost 20 years. They have lightweight backpacks. They have modular backpacks, everything from their mainframe, which is just a frame pack that you can put bags on. They have these cool outside called bat wings that you can use. So check them out at eberlystock.com and make sure you tell them Ike sent you. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Cryptic, cryptic.com. Check them out. Now, Cryptic is a cool company. Not only are they God-fearing patriots and they're veteran-owned, but also they make unbelievable gear. No matter if you're hunting in the deserts of Sonora all the way up to sheep hunting in the Great North, they have a layer or layers for you. Plus, they have a bunch of cool patterns. Everything from Obscura all the way to Highlander, everything that you would need no matter where you hunt typically or that next great adventure. So check them out, cryptic.com.
No, and I'm glad you brought that up. My little background, I was director of operations for a ranch there in central Wyoming, Pathfinder Ranches, and I wasn't a sheep guy, but you spend parts of every month, sometimes half the month there at the different ranches that were held by Pathfinder, and seeing the Ferris Seminole herd, which is got 300, 400 head there that traverse a couple of the Pathfinder ranches. And I started watching sheep, and I admit I'd seen bighorn sheep before, but this was a calling. This was like, man, I wonder what the sheep are up to today. Are the sheep thinking about me? Because I'm sure thinking about them, kind of thing. and going down to the into the Ferris range, into the Seminoles, and watching them through their different life cycles, through the rut and through the lambing, and just understanding or getting getting an exposure to who are wild sheep. What do they do? This is fascinating to me. And so when I left that job, I had to put that passion somewhere. And I am forever thankful to the folks of the Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation. I put in my application to be on the board just to continue working with that passion. And lo and behold, got voted in, although I think I was the only applicant that year, but I won't bring that up again. And then Ryan Lance and I had petitioned in 2021 to reintroduce wild sheep into the Sweetwater Rocks. We'd sent a letter to Director Nesvik. We presented at the June 2021 Game and Fish Commission meeting. The result was the commission asking the Wyoming Game and Fish Department to do some habitat analysis. This is, one of my soapbox issues is, are we doing this out of emotion? I just mentioned my passion, and I mentioned, my drive, or are we doing this because the resource can support wild sheep, and therefore you can expand herd numbers and add another herd in the state, as wild sheep numbers, their numbers are continuing to decline throughout the state. And so it's funny when, your passion and your profession collide, and that was around wild sheep with me. So that journey, learned a lot about Ferris Seminole and the herd, and potentially being a source herd for a potential reintroduction of wild sheep into central Wyoming, specifically the Sweetwater Rocks. It's all on the Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation website. The Sweetwater Rocks Initiative. And then like, it's interesting. You get the habitat report from Director Monteith and Ms. Wagler. You start to look at, okay, what's the process here? How do we do this? Senate File 118 at our last legislature, it truly wasn't an agricultural / wildlife bill. In our letter, in Ryan Lance's and I's letter to the Wyoming Game and Fish Commission, we did not want to harm the ag producers of the area. Letters up on the website from 2021. And you mean that. You don't want to bring something in that folks either hate or don't support. And knowing that was the history of the responses from some of the neighboring ranches. But then there's also the approach of, not just Pathfinder, but now Split Rock Ranch and definitely a handful of others that have commented, yeah, we're all for that. We ranch with wild sheep too, and it's never been an issue. You learn it's not against the wild sheep, but it's more the federal government and decisions they may make. And so that's what Senate File 118 addressed is should grazing leases be altered because of the presence of wild sheep. The Game and Fish can remove those wild sheep is because they are the mechanism of separation from wild sheep to domestic sheep. I Dr. Allison Crane with Wyoming Wool Growers has given a presentation looking at domestic sheep numbers in Wyoming. Very informative. I think if I recall, the turn of the 1900s to 1910, there were 5 million or more domestic sheep in Wyoming. And now that number's down to, 225,000 or 250,000, somewhere in there. And I think, okay, that's quite a decline over 100 and some years. But if domestic sheep at their point in time did fill the habitat that maybe wild sheep once filled, why aren't wild sheep bouncing back as domestic sheep numbers, decrease? And it may not be that they, one dictates the other. But I looked at it as, where is that habitat? Where are there not domestic sheep? So you're not going to affect someone's flock. Where does the habitat exist? And in this case, that diagram pointed right to Sweetwater Rocks. And being quite familiar with it from working at Pathfinder, we thought, let's go there. Let's put this effort together. And again, now you've got, not just the Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation, you've got Wyoming Wildlife Foundation and other partners that have come on board and just realized we can do this. We can work together. We can pass Senate File 118, which benefits the ag producers, equally as one more step towards a translocation of wild sheep into central Wyoming. And so, just next week, the Wyoming Game and Fish Commission and the Wyoming Board of Agriculture will vote on amending language in the Wyoming plan to add the term restoration area. This is a collaborative effort that has come out of the Interaction Working Group of domestic and wild sheep. So a lot's going on. I'm looking at the clock, and I could talk wild sheep and Sweetwater Rocks for the next 2 hours, but I assume you're going to have to get up and go to the bathroom. So
eventually I will. I won't drink too much tea, so I don't have to right now. But so what are some of the hurdles that you guys are facing? You touched across them a little bit, but some of it has to do with the where the agriculture and the wild sheep, where those boundaries are, because in the past it's been a struggle because wild sheep and domestic sheep don't play well in the gene pool as far as diseases and everything else. And is it fair to say, Matt, that the ag industry is concerned that if those sheep get put in there, all of a sudden the federal government or the state government then has a leverage to control agriculture in that area?
It is. You've hit the nail on the head. It's another reason, and that's what I've heard from an ag producer or more with dissenting opinions of wild sheep reintroduction. It's one more thing, because let's look at the list of things. Sage grouse, feral horses. We look at other species in that area, and in this case, the Bureau of Land Management can make decisions on, how much forage remains, regardless of if feral horse numbers are way over objective. That still affects the livestock producer and their ability to make a living. And so we didn't want wild sheep to be another reason. And that's part of the habitat study. That's part of, if we look at the Sweetwater Rocks, 60% of the habitat range is not in a grazing allotment. If you overlay it, where are the irrigated fields, who's growing alfalfa in the area, because I guarantee the sheep, just like the mule deer of the area and the elk of the area, are going to visit those pastures. So, the opinions are valid. Opinions are valid because there are examples where your federal land managers have made decisions that are dissenting against the livestock producers. I at Pathfinder, we had 92 livestock pastures, 92 different areas. That meant, okay, we needed at least 92 water sources throughout because we had pastures without water sources. And well, how do you get, utilization and maintain rangeland health when number one, you can't graze it appropriately, through either salt, mineral, or water distribution. Are they going to concentrate on the stream and just, live along the stream, and therefore you're affecting riparian health, which is an indicator of allotment health. And so all these factors, and just to say it again, we didn't want wild sheep to be another factor. That's why we put it in the 2021 letter. That's why we come to the table to, let's coordinate together. And we feel, if you look back, Senate File 118, now we have restoration area language going into the Wyoming plan, which hasn't been amended in 20 some years. And it's happening now. So is this a modernization? Is this how to do business? I don't know. We just, like I said, you look for where can we not impact agriculture and ag producers? Where does it make sense for habitat? And at the end of the day, I'm advocating, for wild sheep numbers in the state of Wyoming. And
and you guys are taking them out of that Seminole, or that the plan is to move them from the Seminole herd, which, correct me if I'm wrong, those sheep actually came from the breaks in Montana, didn't they?
Yeah, there's you look, the Fair Seminole herd was a reintroduction, and it also involved to get those sheep on that mountain voluntarily. An ag producer converted his domestic sheep permits to cattle, and consequently, Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation was one of the contributing parties to put in water development throughout those cattle allotments. In exchange, yes, you have now a translocation success story to the point that you can draw not just a ram tag there, and trust me, there are some beautiful sheep there, bighorn sheep.
Yeah.
That's also one of the areas for the ewe lamb tag, because the science is saying removing ewes, each population, each group of wild sheep has kind of an upper threshold of their population numbers before they start to reduce the numbers themselves. And then you're searching for why did that herd crash? Why did it go from 400 to 200 numbers? So wildlife managers have said, no, we're going to remove some of the females and keep that herd at a size that we know is productive. The same opportunity exists. Let's move some of those females across Highway 220 into the Sweetwater Rocks and grow a separate herd and put sheep back where they existed for thousands of years prior to our settlement of the West.
That's a good point. I want to hit that a little bit harder. You talk about it being a reintroductory, which that's different than introducing them. It's a reintroductory. They were there before. We had bighorn sheep all across Wyoming at one time when the sheep eaters, which are now the Shoshone tribe, they were everywhere. Yeah. And you talk about the beautiful rams. I was at a live event here a couple weeks ago that we did in conjunction. It was a film festival in Casper with the Dallas Safari Club. And right. One of the guys, Patrick, was showing me video of what they call the dam ram. And he crosses the dam, walks through the man gate. It's the craziest video I've ever seen. This wild sheep crosses the dam through the man gate, and he's got to be one of the biggest sheep in Wyoming right now. He's absolutely huge. He looks like one of those rams out of Fort Peck, or out of the breaks in Montana. So it's a success story. That's a success story because now they're taking ewes and lambs to control the herd size, which means you can move them out. Is there, and how involved have you been in this type of reintroduction before? Because we've learned a lot over the last 30, 40 years. We've learned a lot on how sheep can be introduced into a certain place.
No, you brought up a lot of great points. First, on the reintroduction, the earliest citation was 1812. Fur trader Robert Stewart documented the presence of wild sheep in central Wyoming. And then you've got all your characters. I mean, this is the area of Jim Bridger's exploration, what became the Oregon Trail. You have John C. Fremont, the Pathfinder, coming up there in the 1830s. He's documented shooting a bighorn ram in 1842. This area is historically documented to have wild sheep. You talk about the what we've learned in translocation. I'm glad people were writing things down, because I should do it more in my life, of where I succeeded and where I failed, so that I can learn from my failures. Luckily, we've done that in wild sheep translocation. You don't take high altitude, long distance migratory sheep and put them in a low altitude where you don't want long distance migratory movement. And so here again, we have a herd that, I will tell you, less than 4 miles away exists in the Ferris Seminoes, and same elevation. The Sweetwater Rocks are 5,900 feet up to 9,000 foot. Same type of rocks, same type of ecosystem, and they're not traversing all over. That's what wild sheep do, and they're looking like when the Pedro Mountains burned and it came back with green grass. Boy, those sheep can see that, and they want to get in there. I have no doubt they'd be in the Sweetwater Rocks, except we built a highway right through, dividing them. But it's a perfect location for a source herd to look at a translocated new herd. We're not bringing them from the breaks of Montana or from, Alberta. You literally have the best source herd next door. Now, does that mean ultimate success? I think it means we have a higher potential. We're still dealing with, wildlife ecology here, and a lot of hope goes into that once you open that stock trailer gate and turn them loose.
I have a funny story for you about that. I'm involved in a place in southern Colorado that they moved some sheep into off of one of the military bases, off the Air Force base, and they've moved them into this one area, and it grew, and it's huge now. They're hunting them and everything, and so they decided to do very similar to what you guys are doing. They said, you know what, let's take some of these sheep, move them across the huge canyon that they don't, it's a natural barrier, and we're going to put them over there. And they opened the trailer gate, and they let I think it was 15 ewes and lambs and one ram, and collared them all. And 15 ewes and lambs ran out and started doing their thing, and that ram hit the dirt and took off. And of course, they collared him. All you saw was a dust trail, and he went 95 miles back to where they picked him up.
Yeah.
And of course, the landowner, this is all on private land, the landowner goes, well, now what do we do? Now I got ewes and lambs down here with nothing to breed them. And the biologist goes, just wait, trust us, just trust the process. And lo and behold, December rolls around, and that ram and 3 of his buddies show back up down there, and they breed those ewes and then never left again. I mean, he's going, hey boys, I know we've got all our work done up here. I know where there's 15 ewes that haven't been touched, and it has grown significantly. They're about to start hunting that group, which is, it's a success story. And to your point, that will happen. And I think, it being closer, you might get to the point where they all become one band, and it's just,
It could,
because
yeah.
the highway's not that crazy.
No, and especially being out of Cody, sheep aren't opposed to living on the highway.
That's right.
You don't want you don't want highway deaths of animals.
Fatalities.
You don't want them zipping back and cross. But Wyoming's got pretty good at putting these earthen bridges over highways here lately.
Yeah.
And maybe Highway 220 for wild sheep is a place to do that.
That's right.
You can get to the west end of the Sentinels, and that rock formation within a quarter mile picks up right there at Devil's Gate. And so the habitat exists. Our goal, like you mentioned, is you mentioned a huntable herd. I don't know the number. Tens of thousands of people would love to draw a bighorn sheep tag in Wyoming.
Well, I think there's 3,500 per unit that put in for each one. So,
so here's a chance to add a new herd, and add a new herd that you maybe don't have to pay for that 10-day backcountry experience, like I went on 2 years ago, and I'm about to go on this month. And so it's an opportunity for all levels of hunters, whether those that don't want 10 days in a mule saddle, or a young hunter, or someone that can't spring for an outfitter. And that's the economic side. That's the reality side. From the ecological side, we can have another herd that maybe can be isolated, so that if you have a respiratory outbreak, and say Ferris Seminole, has one, maybe that doesn't affect the Sweetwater rocks, and therefore you can supplement back and forth, because they will be genetically. We know that the Ferris Seminole herd has been identified as that source herd. So, from a sheep standpoint, in the name of conservation, to include that hunting piece, Sweetwater Rocks Initiative. That's why Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation has put a lot of resources behind it and got a lot of support.
I have one last story to talk about to solidify what you just mentioned, as far as being able to source herd and back and forth. We just did a film this last winter. It's on YouTube. Check it out. It's about the history of sheep and in North America, and we were able to take some of my grandfather's footage and tell the story of sheep hunting in North America, everything from bighorns, with the Phantom Ram, that really iconic movie, all the way into some of the stuff in the Northwest Territories and in Alaska. But one of the how we open it is these California bighorns were in British Columbia, and they had killed all the California bighorns in Oregon, Washington. And so they transplanted some from British Columbia down to Washington. And there's photos of my dad who just turned 76, but there's photos of him like 8 years old, standing there looking at these sheep in an enclosure in Washington, the state of Washington, and how they introduced them. Well, part of the story I didn't know until we unveiled this at a film festival at the National Sheep Foundation convention in Reno this year. And this wildlife biologist walks up to me from British Columbia, and he says, "I want to tell you the rest of that story." I was like, "Oh, that's cool. Yeah, tell me the rest of the story." He said, "You guys introduced them into California, Oregon, Washington, reintroduced them. And then our herd ever since has been declining significantly. And we're on the cusp of going back down there to Washington, getting those sheep and bringing them back to British Columbia, as because they're genetically the same herd, they have the same habitat, everything." So that does exist, and it does actually happen, where you guys could put them in the Sweetwater Rocks, and then something happens to the Seminole herd, and you have to push them back across that highway to because of whatever, if it's disease or bad habitat, something, wildfire, something, and you use that and diversify your herd movement. And I think that's just good stewardship, and that's just good management.
Well, and there's a lot of opportunities in Wyoming, and not just for wild sheep, but you've seen it in a lot of the different species. what's occurred in like mule deer migration and what we learned and how we've continued to adjust and adapt. And our wildlife managers, make some very thought out, highly intelligent decisions. And so, like you just mentioned, there's a real world example, and we see an opportunity here in central Wyoming to put sheep back on the mountain.
So let's talk about wildlife management. I know this is a hot subject, touchy subject, but some stuff that's just recently happened. So I want to get your take on it. Feral horses.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned it, and they are feral, and I'm gonna describe it. I won't make you do it. But feral is different than wild because there weren't horses in North America, so they're not wild. They are feral. They got loose and have learned how to exist on these landscapes that they weren't built for. The landscape wasn't built for. They're pretty hard on habitat.
Yep.
Because they're not built for it. The habitat's not built for the horses. And we have a huge number of them in Wyoming, not as big as Nevada, but we have a very large number of these feral horses. They just came out with a court case that was just decided, which is going to allow the BLM to, and I'm talking way out of my boots here, but what is the court case and that just got decided, and how is it going to affect wildlife management?
Well, and to set the stage, you talk the history of horses in North America. If you want to talk pre-Pleistocene, there was a horse species. Those genetics do not exist in current equines. The horses that are currently here, that some call wild, are a combination of the ancestors of some Spanish blood 500 years ago to, in my research and common opinion, to modern domestic horses that were abandoned on the range, and not abandoned deliberately. I talked to a rancher there in the Green River Valley, and before he passed, he remembers as a kid, that's what you did with your horses. You turned them out in the desert in the winter because they survived better than if you just had them hanging around the barn and you were having to feed them. And so, the Bureau of Land Management establishes an appropriate management level. I think Wyoming's is in that 3,700 range. I know Wyoming's excess has exceeded or gone close to 9,000 horses. And I've seen it firsthand at mainly around the Green Mountain area of Wyoming, where we had domestic cattle allotments as part of Pathfinder Ranches. And you can tell where the horses have been. Number one, because they graze differently. They can pull the root and consequently kill the grass, as well as they leave their mark. The mountains of horse poop that exist, and we knew from a management side, we can't shoo them away. You can't even look at them wrong, but then they're camped on the springs and they're camped on the riparian areas. And this to me is so simple of analysis. And I'll use an example. Say you're throwing away a piece of glass and you cut your finger. Okay. You know what to do. You know to go wash it off, put some medicine on it, put a Band-Aid on it, and it'll heal. What cut your finger? Well, that glass did. Now let's look at range management. What is affecting our rangelands? Well, we can look at feral horses and say, that's the glass that's cutting the finger here. And we know that, the BLM, to their credit, has, I don't know the numbers of horses in, managed scenarios that they've adopted out. And for the record, we have a BLM Mustang in my family, and I'm pretty close to him. My daughter rode him last night at our fairgrounds. That same horse is a Cheyenne Frontier Days Dandy's horse, a good horse. But at the same time, I don't hear him complaining about 2 square meals a day and vet care and a roof over his head. Whereas I've seen the other side of the feral horse management, where ribs are showing in half the horses. Full succession hasn't made it because of lack of nutrients. And so that's what I don't understand and I realize people are passionate about this too. I have my passions and I'm acting on them. At the same time, how can you want one species and call them wild when they're feral, they're non-native, and they have such destructive tendencies towards range management? And now let's involve the federal land management that, is trying to manage these same livestock grazing allotments. But, wild horse and wild burros have their own federal legislation as well. I think they're one of only 2 species that has their own federal bill. So is it an easily solvable issue? Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation, we have worked with the tribes on the Wind River Indian Reservation on a project. They were 5,000 to 6,000 head of horses over their AML. Worked with the process because they were affecting sheep habitat. And in fact, one of our grant in aid proposals showed pictures of feral horses grazing right next to wild sheep. And there is a process. Folks don't like to talk about, you can adopt them out as much as possible, but at the end of the day, if we're going to treat them as wild, there are other prescriptions for wild animals that we seem to think are acceptable as a society, and that's lethal harvest. And so I'll leave that. This is a touchy subject, but it's if you want to talk about the principles of rangeland management, I don't believe the feral horse fits into that scenario.
I agree. So do you know what the court case was? Because I'm trying to remember because it was a landmark court case where the BLM won the ability to manage like 4,000 head, some crazy number.
Yeah, I'd have to look at the headlines. I know I saw one recently, and this may be the one you mentioned, where the Bureau of Land Management has the opportunity to make some additional changes within some of their AML areas. And whether that was complete removal or closure, I don't want to tell you or your listeners incorrectly. So that's homework for me. I'm sorry, I'm not up on that.
That's fine. I was curious if you knew exactly what it was. But the good thing is, in my opinion, and kind of to back up what you said, is these guys, the management of the feral horses is progressing to where hopefully we can minimize, at least start to minimize the range management overuse by feral horses, which is good. It's a really good thing. So I know in the essence of time, I know you've got things to do and we're a little bit over time, and I appreciate you sticking with us here, but I do want to have kind of a little bit of a deep dive question for you.
Okay.
You're familiar with TED Talks, right? It's like
I am familiar with TED Talks. Yes.
All right, less than 8 for those in the audience that don't know. It's like a less than 20-minute conversation about, or more than a conversation. It's a talk that is less than 20 minutes that is something that you're really passionate about, and you may not be an expert about it, but you're very passionate about it and willing to share a viewpoint. And I think you've already answered this. Maybe not. Maybe you're going to surprise me. But Matt Hoobler, what would you do your TED Talk on?
Well, you've already touched on a couple of my passions, so I am going to curveball you here.
Good.
And for the record, I'm not known for my less than 20-minute speeches. You might have gathered. Go back to all of my performance evaluations through life, and I think the needs improvement box is checked next to talk less, perhaps. So what I would do, and this ties into that, my TED Talk would be on time, TIME, time. I took an approach to evaluate where do I spend my time. And it really kind of hit me square in the head when I blinked 3 times and moved my oldest daughter into the dorm room. and you realize 90% of the time I'm going to spend with that child, I've already spent. And I'd already had some good training on, being efficient at what you do and spending time, but carving time for what means a lot to me. Obviously, I have a job, and the job gets, their allotted amount of time. When I started looking at it that way and saying, well, that's only their allotted amount of time. And that, people may say, well, that makes you a bad employee. It actually made me more efficient and more productive when I knew my job is going to get, 8 hours a day or whatever it is, 40 hours a week. When I showed up to that, I was ready to crank it out because I had designated that as my job's time. And therefore, well, what is my time for my daughters or my spouse or my friends or hunting or just solitude, adventure? And my TED Talk would be on how do you divide your time? Do I sit down in the evening and want to look at Instagram reels on my phone? Or should I get up and make one little effort that will benefit wild sheep in Wyoming? Because the same amount of time can be used for both. And I got very specific to the point it's even a joke between me and my supervisor, because I'll say, oh, that's my time. Don't ask me to do anything. I will not answer your phone call. I will not bend here. This is my time. And I became more productive, more efficient in all areas of my life when I broke down how to use my time. And makes me think of the esteemed Wyoming poet and lyricist, Chris Ledoux once said, time goes on endlessly, just like the river running surely to the sea. Time, you've left your mark on me, but time, we've had a good time, haven't we? And all aspects of that, I want time to have a good time, and I want time to leave my mark. And so my TED Talk would be on exposing my failures of time wasted to then discussing where I want to spend my time.
So do you physically sit down and say, okay, my time, 8 hours, obviously that's easy, 8 hours at work, but the other portions of your life, do you physically say, okay, I'm going to try and spend X amount of hours a week with my kids, X amount of hours with my spouse, X amount of hours, in solidity, X amount of hours with sheep?
No, not to that detail, but somewhat. I'll sit at work and I'll put on my calendar, from 7:30 in the morning until 9:30 in the morning, I will work on one project. This one thing that's the top of my to-do list. I will not check email. I will turn my phone off. I know that with that on my calendar, I think subconsciously, then I get ready for it. And then I know I'm showing up at 7:30 and it may not be the most desirable thing I get to work on, but I crank it out. And guess what? I didn't procrastinate it. I didn't kick that can down the road. And when you start compartmentalizing those things in your mind, then to me, just the opposite will occur. I'm going on a 10-day sheep hunt. I don't know if I've mentioned that. Pretty excited. And
maybe a couple times.
Yeah. And the fun part is I can tell my mind, you know what? I'm not going to think about work or some stresses during that time. That is my time to stare into a campfire, to look across a valley, to glass for white butts on the mountain. And once I started doing that, the brain is amazing. It allows me to have those 10 days of free from thinking about other things in my life. And it's a full recharge of the batteries. And so I don't know. Another example, my daughter got up this morning, Dad, I'm in a hurry. And I said, you have 10 seconds to hug your father. I guarantee it. She did. And, but it's, how do we evaluate our time? And putting it in little buckets has worked for me. Both, in my own household, in my family, among my friends, my activities, and especially my work.
So once again, you're really good at going down my agenda here and dumping into the next conversation. So you talked about the sheep hunt once or twice during this conversation. Let's talk about that sheep hunt and why you hunt. Why does Matt Hoobler hunt? And then let's talk about, and I don't care which direction you go, but what's the sheep hunt? Who you going with? And it obviously isn't your sheep hunt because you've done that. But
yeah, so to start there, I had our former financial advisor, through Thrivent Financial, he's a 68-year-old man, pretty good health. He drew a sheep tag. I invited him to our Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation summer banquet. He had a friend in Missouri who he wanted to go. Friend said, my knees, my back, can't make it. And Jeff said, Matt, would you love to go? Can you run a camera? Can you be that guy? I will tell you what, for me to go with Cody Brown, they're out of DuBois on a 10-day hunt. Again, I got to go as a +1 with him 6 years ago. Oh my gosh, time in a mule saddle, riding into country that this may be the last time I get to see it. So why do I hunt? This one's a little different because I'm not the hunter. This one is just the excitement to go to places that are so remote and so wild, and that's part of my passion of the sheep is they're not just right around the corner. And oh, by the way, you don't know where they're at. And so if I liken that to your question, why do I hunt? I think it's that pursuit of the unknown. I think it's to get into the wild country, to put my skills to the test. But every hunt's different, and every hunt's exciting. And besides the easy answers of fill the freezer and or shoot a nice deer, or something, it's to me the adventure. And I get a little taste of that going as a +1 on a sheep hunt. Even though I'm not even bringing a rifle, it's that same kind of stimulus of adventure for me.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, how can you have a better September than get to go on a sheep hunt? Is he outfits up the Dunor, doesn't he?
He does. He'll do that area 4.
Yeah.
Is where Jeff has his tag, and same area that my buddy Glenn went in 2018. I think it was 2018. And yeah, I've got to know Cody. He comes to winter meetings and our banquet for the Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation, and obviously one of the premier sheep outfitters, just like Jimmy Owens. So yep. It's man, are you kidding? I got invited on a sheep hunt. Like, yeah. Who, until you've done it. And yes, it is the most miserable thing you'll ever enjoy. And yes, my chiropractor knows when I'll be back. And so, but just, you get to go into the guts of Wyoming. And
that is literally the guts. That's my uncle actually had that area for a number of years as a sheep outfitter. It's a beautiful place. It's unbelievable, actually.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Well, Matt, I appreciate your time and going over time. So you have to find that time somewhere else. And I appreciate you allowing us to do that. And your insights, and of course everything you're doing for Wyoming, everything with the sheep and the water and everything else that you got your hands in. And I know we didn't even scratch the surface of that, but I appreciate your time here on the Eastmans Journal Podcast.
Well, and thank you, and keep up the good work.
Thank you very much.